Hey, Michael.
What's up, Shamin?
How are you, brother?
I feel great, man. Charged up. And yourself?
I'm doing well. I had a mic, a professional mic, ready for this podcast, but it's for some reason it's just not super compatible with my MacBook, so I
Hmm.
have to do with the default system I have and clean it up later.
Okay,
Yeah.
no problem.
How are you? Are you in Venice
Yeah,
Beach?
I had a little bit of travel for the holiday, but now I'm back in LA. I got back a couple of days ago, so settling back in.
Revisit your family?
Yeah, I have a brother in Boston, and my rest of my immediate family is in Philadelphia, so I spent
Mhm.
some time there. And then on the way back, I pit stopped in Sedona and spent a few days there.
Sedona. Yeah, I've heard a lot about Sedona. Yeah,
Good spot. Yeah, you dig it.
yeah. How was the energy there?
Good, man. It was good. Good to soak it up. Hit the trails, did some hiking, spent some time with some friends. It was good medicine.
Beautiful, beautiful. Yeah, Michael. Thank you for joining, giving me the opportunity um, to talk with you, to
Hmm.
discuss.
Yeah, it's my pleasure.
Yeah, so let me introduce the world to this beautiful, humble man, Michael Holt. He is a life coach, a holistic practitioner, a martial artist, a kickboxing artist, and a bunch of other modalities that you're involved in.
Yeah. Yeah. First thing I want to say is I've never liked the phrase life coach. I never describe myself as a life coach. Um, I live here in Venice Beach, and you can take a walk and probably meet four life coaches.
Mm.
Um, I also think it kind of implies that here I am, I've mastered life, and I can coach you through your life, which is not the way I feel about my offering. Uh, I don't claim mastery. I'm very much a student, but maybe I've learned a few more things than the average bear in a few categories, so I'm happy to share. I like to describe my work as a holistic health practitioner, which just means that I implement natural means to optimize the well being and happiness of my clientele. And I introduce concepts and practices that have served me very well. So I know what works because it works for me. And so I'll never ask someone that I'm working with to do something that I don't do myself. Um, so life coaching was never it always just irked me a little bit, that phrase. With regard to martial art, yes, I am a martial artist. I've been studying and practicing for 10 to 12 years now. And I'm an instructor in Muay Thai kickboxing, Filipino martial art. It's also known as Kali or Arnis or Eskrima, Penchak Silat, Tai Chi, Qigong, and self-defense.
Wonderful. Yeah, I love how you bring all these different modalities. And also, just want to remind, well, you have also been involved in, you've also studied shamanism, a few
Mm-hmm.
modalities in shamanism as well.
Yeah, I've begun a formal exploration in education as a shamanic practitioner. That began about 2 years ago. Studying at a place in the UK called the Sacred Trust. I go out there a few times a year for a week of practice and training. It's been very interesting, um, a very interesting course of study. The reason that I decided to undertake it is because I have a few teachers who are very scientific, rational minded people. Uh, I'm talking about Paul Chek, Shinzen Young, and Dan Brown. But sitting with them over the years, shamanism always comes up um, in their discussions and dialogue. So I started to just become very curious. And I was thinking about it this afternoon, actually. If you engage contemplative practice, meditation, mindfulness, altering consciousness without the use of exogenous substances, if you follow that trail all the way back, it leads to shamanism. And shamanism is difficult to define. It's a worldwide cultural phenomena of uh, altering consciousness in service of healing oneself and others. Some degree of shamanism. The shaman has existed in every tribe, every culture, all over the world. So if you undertake contemplative practice, the road will lead you back to the lowest common denominator, which is shamanism. It's before religion, it's before meditation, it's before medicine, it's the original. So I wanted to understand the source. And so I found a program that I believed in, and I pulled the trigger. I signed up for this program in the UK without ever having been there. Basically, I just had a conversation with a woman who I really trust, who's a graduate of the program. And she's the kind of individual who, in a world of people, you know, in this healing world or self-help world, you meet a lot of people who are talking the talk, which isn't hard to do. You know, if you take a few courses and read a few books, you can get the lingo down. But it's more difficult to find individuals who walk the walk, who are the medicine, who live and breathe what they teach. And this woman is one of those. And so I had a conversation with her about her course of study, and this is where she comes from. So I said, all right, let's do it. And I pulled the trigger, and it's been a rewarding experience.
Beautiful. Yeah, one of the most fascinating things that has attracted me to shamanism, besides the different, use of other healing tools, because the Amazon is where a lot of our contemporary medicines come from. Mm-hmm. All the species of trees and plants, fauna, is the usage of archetypes and the connection to nature, animals and plants, and how an animal represents a part of our psyche or a specific objective, something we want to humans. We always want to achieve focus, direction, calmness, surrender. So all these different elements that we as human beings portray to sort of belong to a higher dimension. Mm-hmm. Shamanism has already recognized them, and they see it in nature itself. And sure. That's one of the things that actually attracted me to, like, beside me, you have Grandfather Fire.
Yeah, I love it.
Yeah, and so that has been my inclination, my path. And even if you look at also Eastern, Kung Fu, they are associated with a number of schools and techniques associated with different animals, different traits. So I'm also super curious about, the commonalities in all these ancient cultures in terms of movement, in terms of healing, and how it changes us within.
Sure.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's the exploration. Dive in, connect the dots, and build something that's uniquely your own. It's beautiful. And I found shamanism to be a very fruitful exploration of the unrational, not the irrational, but the unrational. Experiences that just defy explanation. I've come into this program and these practices with an open mind, and I've had some experiences that defy rational explanation. And that's okay with me. I think deepening in the path, there is a point where you have to surrender scientific, intellectual things that can be clearly explained. And my exploration into the path, I have experimented with plant medicines, and I think for the average person, the word shamanism is immediately correlated with plant medicine. But actually, that's not the case. Most shamanic traditions worldwide don't really use any exogenous substances. Consciousness is altered through ritual, through physical hardship, through rattling, drumming, guiding the mind into deeper and deeper states, where there you may encounter non-physical beings that want to help you evolve as a soul and as a human. And now you have that help available to you. Like I said, sometimes I hear myself speaking, and if I was to hear what I'm saying now, maybe 5 years ago or 10 years ago, I would say, what are you talking about? But the more I learn, the less I know. So I come into these things with an open mind, and I test the results in the laboratory of my personal experience. And in my personal experience, what I've learned is worth learning, worth integrating, worth practicing, and worth sharing.
Absolutely. Thank you for sharing that. And yeah, it's comes down to our bodies. I also, like a lot of my teachers and, people I've studied with, they always help me transmit the message of self-development and our bodies as a tool of expression.
Mm-hmm.
So it all happens, the experience happened within us, and we have the brain and we have billions and billions of neural connections, everything happening. And one connection gives rise to a certain state. And that's at the root of it. All these different ancient practices are happening, creating something within the human experience, within the human body.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, and it's a great segue to meditation. And that's when I actually found you in one of your free meditation courses. It was remind me, 6 or 7 week, or maybe 10 weeks.
Yeah, it was great to have you, man. It was an 8-week course.
Mm-hmm.
And I think, gosh, that must have been a year or 2 years ago, I believe. Time flies. I can't keep track of it. But yeah, I remember your diligence in the course, and it was you asked really insightful questions, and it was a pleasure to have you in the class.
Yeah, thank you very much. And to this day, that is my practice. And out of all there are different techniques of meditation. There are different schools, but let's talk about maybe a little bit of what it was inspired from your teacher, one of your teachers, if I'm.
Yeah, the course that I taught was actually a requirement to earn a teacher certification in what's called the Unified Mindfulness System, developed by my teacher, Shinzen Young.
Mm-hmm.
So Shinzen is a pretty remarkable human being. He is a very bright mind, a very scientific mind. He is actually a scientist. He has a lab in Arizona, University of Arizona, I believe, where he's developing technology to, how can I say this? He's studying and researching technology to bring about a baseline of enlightenment for humanity generally. So he's studying the minds of very experienced meditators like himself, uncovering what parts of the brain are active in peak states, and then stimulating those parts in non-meditators so that they can have the same experience without having to go to the monastery for 30 years. So it's pretty exciting. But yeah, and he's developed what's called unified mindfulness. He is a former Zen Buddhist monk. He practiced at Mount Koya, Japan, years ago, lived there for, I think, 3 or 4 or 5 years. And so he's actually like a legit monastic practitioner. But what sets him apart is he's also a scientist. So I think a lot of people try to talk about the scientific effects of meditation, but when you hear him do it, you're like, oh, this guy's in a class of his own. So I was exposed to him through another teacher of mine named George Haas. I studied with George for a long time, and George, as I got to know George at deeper levels, more of a friendship level, he told me about his teacher Shinzen. So then I started to practice with Shinzen. I would go and sit on retreats with him, probably starting around 7-8 years ago, and just really deepen my practice in that system that he's developed. Unified mindfulness is basically, it's a secular approach to meditation training, but he's studied the world's contemplative traditions and basically put them in these categories of, okay, so the Christian mystics call it this, the Theravada Buddhists call it this, but it's the same thing. So here's the practice. So it's very it's a distillation of the wisdom streams that humanity has developed throughout the years. And I found it very fascinating. And so really to deepen my understanding of the curriculum, I wanted to get the teacher certification. And so that's what I did. And that's how our paths crossed, because you signed up for the course.
Mm-hmm. And it's a very simple practice.
Yes, it's practical. That's what I love about Shinzen. I'm drawn to teachers that are practical.
Mm-hmm.
There's so much airy, fairy, mystical, schmystical stuff out there, and it's all well and good, and it is part of the practice. But instruction needs to be practical, and practical instruction leads to the mystical. But if you start with the mystical, I find it to be convoluted, and I don't know. There's no direction. So I'm drawn toward practical teachers, and Shinzen is the most practical teacher.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, one of my, so just to break it down in simple terms, is it's a practice where obviously, you know, you have the basics of meditation, you have the right posture, you close your eyes, and then you bring your awareness to your senses. We have the visual, the auditory, and the felt sense, correct?
Correct, exactly. Yeah, you're describing one of the techniques, see, hear, feel.
See, hear,
That
feel.
would be, in the system, it's called see, hear, feel, but it's basically Vipassana. And Vipassana is the teasing apart of the sensing experience into its component threads. So you're noticing where the mind lands moment by moment. And if you pay close attention, you'll find that the mind is constantly flittering and fluttering about between three sense categories primarily, as you described. See, which is the internal and the external visual field. Hear, which is internal mental talk and external sound. And feel, which is somatic sensation, and internally would be emotional sensation. So as you start to pull these threads apart that coagulate into the self-experience, the mind becomes very concentrated, and you can notice moment by moment where it lands. So there's no coagulation of a separate shameen that is existing apart from everything else. It's just the sensing experience. So it induces a state of high concentration and a state of flow from which insights emerge. Barriers between self and world that were formerly very clearly defined start to become not so clearly defined. And practice becomes psychedelic and exciting.
Mm, absolutely, yeah. It's my morning meditation practice till now, and as you said, like those insights, there has to be a groundwork laid before those insights come in, and that groundwork is disconnecting from our everyday thought patterns.
Right, exactly. So we can only think about what we already know. I like to think of it like a dog chasing its own tail. Thought is very circular. You really can't think your way into anything brand new. But as you cultivate high states of concentration, that becomes the fertile ground from which insight emerges. So if you ever had that epiphany, that $1 million idea, that aha moment, very rarely does it come from a linear progression of thinking your way into it. It often just comes like a lightning bolt. So if we cultivate the fertile soil of high concentration, then we allow insights to emerge from that soil of concentration. So it's almost like new ideas come from learning not to think so much.
Yeah, it's a sort of contradictory to what we have been taught growing up. Yeah.
Sure.
Yeah, the part of us that wants to always achieve something.
Absolutely.
Yeah, meditation, and I would like to jump into routines, how important it is to have, and we have spoken about it in different men's circles, and I'm sure every high performance athlete, executive, ponder this question: what is the right routine to start a day with to achieve, what they desire, a goal, a vision? So, I mean, for me at least, it's I start with movement.
Mm-hmm.
Stressing my system, and then a bit of meditation, perhaps a breath work, and then I come back. I use my mind to create, certain visualizations or a mindset or a vision, and then connect my body to the feeling. So there's a lot of ranges and a lot of different ways one could sort of play around with a routine for their day. And what are your thoughts on this?
Yeah, it's a foundation in my work with the people that I work with is cultivating regimens and rituals that optimize vitality and well-being. I think it was Tim Ferriss who did a study of highly performing individuals, like you said, athletes, CEOs, executives, people who are highly functioning. And they all have a regimen, they all have ritual, they all have a routine. There's not a lot of commonality between their routines. Everyone kind of finds their own way. The common thread is that there's something that you do every day when you wake up before you engage the world. To touch that sacred space of aloneness, to connect to source, God, Tao, universe, creator, whatever word you want to use is not so important. But whatever that word is for you, to develop some kind of ritual around that. It could just be 5 minutes. As practice deepens, it tends to get longer and longer and longer. I like to I wake up pretty early and I don't take any work obligations before 1:30, which is what time we started. And I like to spend the whole, first half of my day in my practice regimen, because then when I show up for work, I'm really here and I'm really well taken care of and filled up, and I have so much that I can share it with whoever I'm called to share it with that day. But I find that if I don't take that time to fill my cup, then I don't have anything to share. And so I don't look at that's a sacred time for me. And I don't look at it as a selfish thing. I look at it as a service thing. Because if I take the time to fill up, then I have more than I can use, and I can share my love with the others.
Mm-hmm.
But what's most important for me is to fill my cup first. It's like the cliche. If you're on the airplane and the mask comes down, what do? Put your mask on first, right? Before you help the others. So my regimen has become quite long. I'm actually working on a blog now where I'm going to detail the full extent of my daily practice. And I'll just put it out there and offer it to tribe, to the men's community, and guys can pick. You don't have to do the 6-hour routine. I didn't start with that, but maybe pick one or two things and make it a practice. And then what happens is these rituals and practices and regimens cultivate energy. So the more energy you have, the more you can cycle back into your practice. So it becomes a feedback loop. The more energy you cultivate, the more energy you can fuel into your practice. The longer the practice becomes, the more energy you have. The more energy you have, the longer the practice becomes. And so I think the high bar really of a practitioner is to have a whole day that's uninterrupted ritual practice. The Lakota say, walk in beauty, live in prayer. So to have a whole entire day that's an unbroken ritual, that's the goal. And that can start with a 10-minute morning regimen, but just stick to it.
Do you mind sharing with the listeners, how do you fill your cup?
Yeah, I'd be happy to. In fact, what I want to do is I've listed the tenets of my practice here on this blog, and so I'll share it with you. And if any of them sound interesting to you, you can let me know and we'll talk about it. So here we go. It's a long one. You ready?
Right
Morning
on.
routine. There's about 22 items here, starting with hydrate, medicate, consecrate, caffeinate, defecate, educate, exfoliate, invigorate, vasodilate, emulate, alleviate, oxygenate, ingratiate, meditate, regulate, evacuate, coordinate, circulate, annihilate, detonate, capitulate, exhilarate, incinerate, create.
Wow.
I actually shared that list with a friend this morning, and I said, I don't think there's ever been more information packed into 23 words.
I was also listed. I was reading this morning my reading ritual included Food of the Gods by Terence McKenna. It talks about language, how language shapes your reality, and how you put out all of these, your regimen, into certain words like that hit you, has this like, sharp effect on your consciousness. As I like that. So yeah.
Yeah, so that describes the first 6 or 7 hours of my day. And it's very liberating, actually, to wake up and not have to make any decisions. The practice is laid out. I don't need to think about what I'm going to do or what do I feel like doing. For me, that doesn't feel good. For some people, it does feel good. I'm not one of them. So to be able to just get up and dive into the regimen and know that I don't have to think, I don't have to make decisions, I don't have to make choices, because it's already predetermined what I'm going to do. I find that to be very liberating. The discipline of the routine is what actually is very liberating and freeing. And because I don't have to think, I don't have to use that part of my mind, by the time I'm finished, I'm very highly concentrated and I'm very energized. And so I ride that wave of my practice into the first work obligation of the day. And that's why I don't take a lot of work obligations on a regular day, a couple hours, because I look at my morning routine not as separate from my work day. My work is my life. That's been my goal. That's the foundation of my work day. My morning routine is, I punch in when I start that routine. I'm on the clock. That's part of my work.
Beautifully said. Yeah, I sometimes struggle with that. The time you wake up, the time you jump in your first routine, I have a stream of thoughts coming in, because I check in with my body. Am I feeling, is my body strong enough to handle that specific routine? Oh no, maybe I'll do a different routine. Maybe I'll go running instead of doing yoga. But I like the fact that you have something set up and you jump into it without letting your thoughts take over.
Yeah, and like I said, I started this kind of practice, over a decade ago, and I've gone through all the ups and downs of maintaining a regimen just like anyone else does. It takes a lot of time and effort and energy to cultivate a habit to the point where it becomes automatic. So if anyone's listening here and they don't have a morning regimen and they're wanting to establish it, I think it's important to be patient with yourself. If only it were so simple to just do the thing that you want to do without having to encounter all the resistance that you will encounter along the way. I first started trying to cultivate a daily meditation practice years ago for 20 minutes or something, and I would stick to it for a week or two and then fail, and then berate myself for having failed, and then not practice for a week or two. And those ups and downs and showing up to your practice and not showing up to your practice are just part of it. You just have to be patient with yourself, not too patient. Be firm with yourself, not too firm. Find that middle ground, and at some point, an effortlessness will emerge. This is what I call the shift from discipline to harmony, where you no longer have to white knuckle it to force yourself to get to the cushion or whatever the thing is. Actually, you encounter this place inside where the thing that's best for you and the thing that you want to do become the same thing. And that's a harmonious way to live. I've thought about this. I think the bridge from discipline to harmony is twofold. The first part of the bridge is embodiment, is really beginning to inhabit your body. I think you've heard me say we spend most of our attentional resources from the neck up, always thinking. And that internal voice becomes so loud that it drowns out all the sensations. And so as we effort to inhabit our bodies more and really attenuate to what it feels like to be inside this body, we find that, okay, specific practices make it feel much better to be inside this body. So the more time we spend inhabiting the body with our attention, the more we have a moment by moment feeling of how it feels to be in this thing, the more clear it becomes that, okay, when I engage specific practices, it feels better to be inside this body. So it becomes easier to get to the practice. So embodiment is number one, inhabiting the body intentionally and consciously. The second bridge from discipline to harmony is self-love, is the practice of self-love. It's actually endeavoring to treat yourself the way you would treat somebody that you authentically care about and want the best for. And as you start to really love yourself, you find that, okay, if I want to optimize this experience of myself, then there are rituals and practices and regimens that I can implement, not because I'm unable to accept myself as I am now. And I think if I meditate for 30 minutes a day, then I'll be able to love myself more. But because you recognize that because you already love yourself exactly as you are, you want the best for yourself. So you're willing to engage rituals, regimens, and practices that you know are good for you. So discipline is an indispensable aspect of cultivating a habit, and it's an indispensable aspect of the path. And it must be cultivated and tended to. But at a certain point, I think it needs to be released and given permission to flower into harmony. And as harmony starts to emerge, the practice becomes more and more effortless, to the point where it's, Shinzen often says, you're no longer even meditating, you're being meditated.
Wow. That was quite powerful. Yeah, and just to align on the same idea is, at least for me, it was knowing the why of the embodiment of the practice itself.
Mm-hmm.
Why am I doing this? Like, right now there hasn't been a day that, I can't go without a day without meditating, because I know after 20, 30 minutes of sitting in myself and scanning my body, being in my body, the state I'm in, and the way I interact with the world after my practice, it's different versus when I don't do it. That becomes my why. That gets embedded into my psyche, into myself. And, when I go running, you get the runner's high. Like, wow, I feel incredible. I feel full of energy, have more concentration, more clarity. So that has been my journey, doing the practice and developing relationship with the practice, developing the why, internalizing the why. And now I know I can speak about it. I can authentically tell other people to do it, because I truly feel it's going to help the other person.
Right, because you've put yourself through it. That's the most important thing. Yeah. And yeah, you make a great point. The why is the most important part. That's if I'm going to be working with someone, the first question I ask is why? What's the motivator? Why do you want to do this? And it has to be a pretty big why. If someone tells me because they want to lose 15 pounds or because they want to feel less stress, those kind of whys don't cut it. You need a big why, a big dream, a big vision, a big goal, a big purpose. Because once you can see that clearly in your mind's eye, there's a lot of energy in that vision. And then you can source that vision as the energy source for the changes that you're going to need to make as you are right now, so that you can meet that. Because it's going to require energy. It's going to require a lot of energy. So when I work with someone, why is something that we spend quite a bit of time on. And it needs to be clear. It needs to be clearly defined. It needs to be big, because that's the fuel source.
Absolutely, yeah. And one of the gifts or blessings we humans have, our species have, is the power of imagination. So even if you ask yourself why, you have an entire open canvas, this consciousness, where you can train, because we always feel like, the tools we have are always voluntary. I can run, I can fight, I can gather food, hunt, but there are a lot of tools within, if you cultivate your awareness, that you can have access to. Sure. And then you have that, and you have the why, and you have an open field of imagination. And it for me at least, if coming back to something you said, would I be doing this 5, 6, 7 years ago? Like, no, I would be like, what am I doing in this gathering, gathering of like 10, 15 people sitting by the fire and singing? Like, what's going on? But it's the cultivation of the tools we have, that we humans are blessed with, that a lot of us are not aware of.
Mm-hmm.
We can say, oh, the power is within you, the power is within you, but what is that power? Right?
Right, exactly. Yeah, I think for an individual to reach to understand their capacity to invite latent sensitivities, it's necessary to sit still and invite those to come online. And that can be a painstaking process. I mean, I know you've been diligently practicing your meditation. It's largely mundane. The peak experiences are not the norm, but over the course of time, you steep into that space of stillness. You acclimate to it. Baseline of clarity, concentration, sensitivity starts to deepen. But we're talking about a long game here, years, decades of practice. I've heard the Dalai Lama once asked, someone was asking them about progress on the path, and his recommendation was just keep practicing and check in with your progress once a decade. So just keep practicing, just keep going, and know that in time, the fruits of your practice will sprout. But it can't be rushed. Now, another thing in my work that's critical, as a holistic health practitioner, is managing a lifestyle and looking at the practical stuff. We talked a bit about shamanism and meditation and peak experiences, and many people are clinging to those kind of things as solutions, but they're overlooking the way that they live their life every single day, day to day. And what I'm talking about is, what do you eat for breakfast? What time do you go to sleep? How much water are you drinking? And is the quality of your water good? The human body is a highly attenuated, brilliant organism, as long as you don't fuck it up. But the modern lifestyle today really fucks it up. So much junk food, so much screen time, dysfunctional breathing. So in my work, I really look practically at one's lifestyle and cultivate physical health in service of what you might call a spiritual awakening or an enlightening experience. Because the body is the mind is the body. So what you're putting inside your mouth every day really affects the spaces that you'll be able to access in your spiritual practice. So what I encourage people to do is approach breakfast as a spiritual practice, approach hydration as a spiritual practice, approach what time you go to sleep at night as a spiritual practice. It's all spiritual. It's all spiritual. This is a spiritual experience that we're having. And your daily cultivation of health or lack thereof will either serve you or hold you back from waking up to the deepest part of yourself. So what I try to facilitate in my life and with the people that I work with is the cultivation of physical health connected to spiritual experience. There's no line of demarcation between, okay, this is my physical well-being practice and this is my spiritual practice, this is my emotional practice. It's all the same thing. A phrase that I've heard is, I think that is what they teach to medical students. If you hear hooves, expect horses. And the wisdom in that line is, okay, in this part of the world, if I was to hear hooves, it could be zebras, possible, but it's not likely. So if someone comes to me with problems and their solution for those problems is to access guides from astral realms and ask for help, yet they're not really being mindful about the Twinkies that they're eating every day, I think they're stepping over dollars to pick up dimes. So a big part of what I do in my work is bring people back to earth. Okay, let's come back to earth for a moment. Okay, Let's have a look at your hydration, your nutrition, the state of your mind, the depth of your breath, your sleep hygiene, your movement protocols, before we start to go all the way out into the astral realms. See what I'm saying?
Real time.
Yeah, yeah.
Absolutely. Yeah, this is it's like my main focus of studies now. I am currently an epigenetic coach, and I study how all these inputs, your nutrition, your sleep, your environment, your supplements, the water, everything, how it changes you, your to the how it changes your genetic expression, because our genes, the blueprint doesn't change. Epigenetics is the layer above it that you can upregulate or downregulate, and it starts when you are in the mother's womb too. There are studies that's done that if a mother is like stressed out or is afraid, it changes the expression of a gene called the GAD gene, GAD1, and it's related to dopamine and a bunch of other neurotransmitters that could lower down. And people, when they're adults, like, why am I too anxious? Why am I too agitated? And the main cause could be that specific moment in their life where that gene has been altered, because our genes leads rise to our the proteins and the entire structure of our body. So that's one of my focus of study right now. And as you said, it's our human body is this intelligent organism with this power to either upgrade or degrade.
Sure.
And we are taking in everything from the environment, and the whole universe, this system is designed in such a way. You have the sun. We need a specific amount of light at a certain time in the day to trigger the circadian rhythm in the body, and we need some light during the sunset. Those are the two specific times. You have the moon place, you have the clouds. Everything has a purpose, and that's what going deep into meditation on the other works has made me realize that we are connected to the whole, and we are the whole at the same time. There's this beautiful symbiosis. And for the first step, at least for someone who wants to move towards self-actualization or healing, is to try to adapt to what is natural already. Are you eating the right food? Then the water you should drink, the food, the amount of sleep you should be getting at the right time. And these days, it's not a lot of people follow that.
Yeah, it's true. We live in a society that's not very conducive to optimal health, and I find that if you really want to claim optimal vitality for yourself, you have to be willing to do things that most people don't do and be a bit of an outlier. But you want to be an outlier in a society where most people, sorry to say, are sick, emotionally dysregulated, overweight. You don't want to be average. If you want better than average for yourself, you have to do things that most people don't do. And that's just the way it is. I think Carl Jung said, the average man can't be successful because he's average, right? Yeah. So you have to be willing to do things that most people don't do. There are rules to the game, and you started to articulate some of them. There are rules to optimal well-being. In my work, I basically look at 6 pillars: state of the mind, the depth of the breath, the quality of your sleep, the quality of your hydration, the quality of your food, and the quality of your daily movement. Those are rules. Okay, we have human bodies. There are rules that govern them. You don't have to follow them, but if you want to optimize your life experience, you want to follow them. So I find that if you develop a day that checks those 6 boxes, a lot of problems tend to evaporate.
Absolutely. Yeah, it all comes back to how aware are we? Because there has been, what I've seen from my experience, and the reason I sometimes I reflect back on my life, and ask myself why have I not found the right teachers, the right answers? It was because there was a gap between the knowledge and my search for me connecting my why to that specific answer, the specific solution. And and I found it like I began to ask myself, why was that? It's because I was not in the right environment with the right people. Sometimes, you know, there's a saying: you become the product of the five people, the five people you hang out with. It comes down to what they say, how they behave, their thought patterns, the frequency around them. And if you live in a certain city, in a certain family, in a certain home where you're surrounded by a frequency that does not change, that does not leads towards optimization, or does not challenge you or makes you think outside the box, that becomes a little difficult. And that's when you have a guide, a teacher like you, or someone who you meet them at an event, you discover a YouTube channel, they say something and they trigger a certain thought in your head. Huh, okay, that makes sense. And then boom, you are in a different path. It has opened a different doorway.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, you see what's possible. I've had great teachers in my life that have shown me what's possible. And it's like, wow, if I just live this way, if I implement and integrate these practices that I've been taught and make this part of my day every day, imagine the man I might become in a year or 5 years or 10 years or 50 years. So being exposed to information is one thing. Integrating that information through action on a day, through a daily practice, it all comes back to practice. It all comes back to practice. Action is crucial. Um, you make a good point, and I can relate to it. If one is called to a deeper inquiry than is common in their family system or social circle, that can feel a little isolating. But I also think it's important, and I also think it's important to follow that inquiry and follow your soul into things that are important to you, but don't alienate the people who aren't interested in it. You know, uh, it's easy to do that, to write people off because they're not deep or spiritual or whatever. But that becomes very isolating. And so the practice, I think, becomes, and for me has served me very well, is just love people where they are. Just love them where they are. You'll find your brothers and sisters that are on the same path as you and your teachers, and that's great, but it's not for everybody. And so love people where they are. I was home for the holidays, and I've gone home for the holidays for years and years, and there's an expression that I'll share. It's something like, when I became a Buddhist, I alienated my friends and family and annoyed most people. When I became a Buddha, I noticed that individuals would come to me and ask my support in certain things. So the difference is, you find these principles, these practices, this information, and then you see other people living in contrast with it. And so you want to, because you love them, you want to say, why are you doing this? Stop. Why don't you try this? But if a loved one didn't ask for your input or for your help, and you're offering it, you are alienating them, and both parties lose in those situations. So I know a lot of things about a lot of things. I have a lot more to learn for sure. But in certain social settings and family settings, I keep my mouth shut unless somebody asks me. And I find that if I keep my mouth shut, people ask me. But there was a point in my development and my practice where I just wanted to point out everything that everyone was doing wrong. Doesn't make anybody feel good. So it's, in some ways, it's like a circle. You leave the family system and the tradition of the family, and you go out on your own path, but then it brings you right back to love and say, oh, this is the people. These are my flesh and bone. They have their soul journey. I have my soul journey. It's not the same. C'est la vie. God bless you. I love you.
I love that. And it has been the same for me. When I started this path, I always had this tendency to see certain behavior, which I had a long time ago in other people. And there was always a part of me that, oh, you have to correct this person. You have to correct this person. And then you come to realize, no, that's not the way.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it's you embody it. They feel it in you. If they're interested, they will reach out.
Yeah, if not, they won't. No big deal.
Yeah. And you did a great practice last time in one of our tribe. You are a member of the tribe community, a great container for practice for men.
Yeah, if any men are listening, I'm a founding member of Tribe Men's Community. That's an international community of men dedicated to the practice of freedom, purpose, and love. We meet once per week for online calls and typically 2 in-person retreats per year. This past year was a little complicated, as you know, so we weren't able to meet in person, but we did have an online intensive. But yeah, check out tribemenscommunity.com and join us. The movement is moving. We got hundreds of guys from all over the world, so it's been a very rewarding experience.
Yeah, that I felt really listened to and nurtured in the community, and you guys have a few level of in-depth expertise. Someone on relationships, someone on purpose, someone on finance. So I really love the structure and the programs. And your monthly calls, on one of your monthly calls, I think the one last time we did, I think it was 2 Thursdays ago, one of the practices was cultivating that loving awareness for someone, a family member of someone that you don't get along with. That was that's challenging for some people because it stresses a part of your nervous system that you're not acquainted with. Because we, on a day-to-day life, we as a human organism, we are not drawn towards people that increases our pain perception, like pain threshold. But that is like you are sort of changing your default behavior using a beautiful tool of spirituality. It's like connecting to the heart.
Yeah, inviting that possibility into your awareness that this person who you find difficult is a whole person, just like you, with their own struggles and aspirations and challenges and pain. And if you were them, you'd be just like them. So that's a formal practice of cultivating loving kindness. And who suffers your agitation with a difficult person? You. We suffer the agitation with difficult people. So we can have a look at that and free ourselves from it. It's the practice, not for the practice is not for the difficult person. It's for you. Yeah. And who's more difficult than, the people that we came into this planet with, our family, that we grew with, that's high level spiritual practice, family relationships, because, they press the buttons better than anybody because they've been pressing them since before we could even speak, So you remember the comic that I shared that kicked off the talk. I think that says it all. It's this yogi, for the listeners, it's this yogi, on the mountain, perfect posture, snow falling. And then you see that yogi in his monastic robes with his master, and the master says, "You're nearly there. You have one more test on your path to enlightenment." And then the next scene is that yogi in his monastic robe sitting at the dinner table with his family. So it all comes, it's full circle. It's full circle. Anybody can find peace in the cave all by ourselves. But the real testament to your practice is, can you bring it into your life? Can you bring it into difficult relationships? Can you bring it into difficult moments? That's where the rubber meets the road.
Beautifully said, brother. Yeah, we have a few minutes left, and I also want to inform the listeners that you have your own brand program, Savage and Saint.
Yeah. Savage and Sane. If anyone wants to connect or learn more about my work, they can find information on my website, which is savageandsaint.com. SAVAGEANDSAINT.com. And that's just like a living philosophy that I've developed, you know, as we talked a little bit about. I am a martial artist, and I've always been called to that path. You know, I have competitive ring experience, and um, I never liked this idea of just being a yogi, just being a peace and love, meditating kind of guy. I've, for me to feel balanced, I want to leaven that spiritual practice of contacting the heart with the savage practice of martial brutality. Uh, and then go to the extreme at either end of that continuum between savagery and saintliness, and find the spot in the middle and just live in the middle and wait for life to ask you what she needs from you in that moment. Because what I find in the men's work and in my own life is a lot of guys, they get stuck in that expression of savagery, and it becomes like macho or like a cloak of toughness, and they lose contact with their feelings, and that's no good. The other side of that is like a new age spiritual type guy, like what I would call Burning Man spirituality. No disrespect to anybody, but who has basically castrated a very natural part of himself that is, you know, tenacious and aggressive and brutal. That's in our bodies, you know, that's part of us. And if that is ostracized, it tends to show itself in unskillful ways. So a hallmark, a foundation of my personal practice has been to really dive fully into those two archetypes, savage and saint, and then find myself in the middle of the two and be in a position to offer either one depending on the demands of the moment. And most of the time, life uh, asks for saintliness, for service, for generosity, for compassion. But in my experience, there have been moments where savagery was called for. You know, I live in Venice. Things can get a little dicey around here. And more than a few times, I've been in a position to help somebody who was being physically hurt because of my training. Um, so it's my personal opinion that a man who would reach his fullness should practice both ends of the continuum. And so that's what I do, and I find it to be very fulfilling. I guess I'm a Libra, so balance is important to me. And so I dive full into both ends.
Wow, what a what a um, what an interesting spectrum, um, and I love the way you put it. The, the two different spectrums. It's like homeostasis of the body, coming back to the balance.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
It's inwards and outwards.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly.
When the world calls for it, you deliver what the world needs, and it's always in an act of service. Yeah. Beautiful, brother. Thank you very much. I think we're running out of time, and thank you very much for your presence, your willingness to have this talk. And, you know, I can go on and on. There are so many topics I want to discuss with you, and I think we can talk all day. And I hope to do, you know, more in the future with you. And thank you. I truly appreciate your time, Michael.
I appreciate you too, Shameen. Thank you for the invitation, man. It's great to talk to you.
I hope.
Aho, you be well.
Take care, brother.